Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Larson. When I'm discussing diet and dietary strategies with patients, there's a lot of items that are kind of negotiable, a lot of things that we can kind of discuss the pros and cons, and we can come up to an agreement of what, is going to be doable for them as an individual. But there's a few things that are like non-negotiables. We can't even discuss even sort of moderate amounts of certain things. And by far at the top of that list, it's high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup, or just high fructose any kind of syrup, is just really, really bad for the body. So I was interested in the study that just came out recently. It was put together by researchers at the Joslin Diabetes Center, and they published their recent findings in a journal called Cell Metabolism. And it was very interesting because they looked at something that I've never really seen discussed in a research paper, and it's exactly why is fructose so bad. And just take a step back, why do you think diabetes researchers are interested in the effects of fructose? And really what it comes down to is a major condition that's really plaguing our culture. It's kind of like the condition that we really have to get a hold of, especially in Western culture, which is metabolic syndrome. And we know that metabolic syndrome is a precursor to diabetes. So it's very clear why they're interested in fructose and its connection to metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, we've talked about it many times before, has 5 different characteristics, and all you have to have is 3 out of those 5 characteristics to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, and that is an increased waist circumference. Generally that's thought of as 35 inches and above for women and 40 inches and above for men. That's one. Increased blood pressure, increased blood sugar, increased triglycerides, and low HDL cholesterol. And so if you have 3 out of the 5 of these conditions, then you're considered to have metabolic syndrome, and it's a major risk factor for all kinds of things. With diabetes we talked about, certain cancers even, heart disease, obesity, and those are just the big things. There's lots of stuff in between that metabolic syndrome is a significant risk factor for. So what's that have to do with fructose? Fructose is fruit sugar. If you eat, a piece of fruit, you're going to get a little bit of fructose, and that's all good. This is not an anti-fruit kind of discussion, and that's not at all what the researchers are suggesting. It's when the fructose is taken out and concentrated and kind of really concentrated in a certain amount that makes it very, very high in fructose. If you're having some like berries and an apple or something like that, that's a small amount of fructose, not that big of a deal. Plus you're getting all the other nutrients that kind of help to buffer the effects of the fructose. That's not a problem. It's the high concentration of high fructose products, and these are all over the place. If you go to a fast food joint, you're going to be inundated with high fructose products. So what they wanted to investigate was the effect of fructose on the liver, because we know the liver is kind of the center of the universe as far as overall blood sugar metabolism. And so what happens is fructose is not used by the body like other sugars are, like glucose. Remember, table sugar is glucose and fructose as a 1-to-1 relationship, like half glucose, half fructose, and that's table sugar. Glucose has a completely different effect on the human body than fructose. Glucose is allowed to be used all over the body. And the effects of insulin, glucose goes up. Insulin can be used to allow the glucose to go into the cells, and that glucose can be used by the cells as fuel. But fructose doesn't have this relationship with the body. Just kind of the liver metabolizes it a little bit, and when it's kept in small quantities, like from a piece of fruit or some berries, that's no big deal. But in this high concentrated amount of fructose, it's a really big deal. And we knew there's been lots of studies on the fact that high fructose causes fatty liver disease. Sometimes we call it NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And this is a type of fat that accumulates around the liver that really inhibits normal function of the liver. And they know that this is associated with metabolic syndrome and then other chronic conditions like diabetes and obesity. but they didn't really understand the mechanism as to why fructose has this problem with the liver. And here's what it comes down to. It's a very interesting study. They looked at a lot of kind of technical pathways of how fructose interacts with the liver. But what it comes down to is this, is it shuts off certain genes that lead to fat metabolism. So not only does fructose cause more fat accumulation, but it blocks down the liver's ability to burn that excess fat. So it's kind of a double negative. Also, what it does is it causes malfunction to the structure and shape of the mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria, these little batteries in all of our cells that charge our cells, and they're kind of the powerhouses of our cells. So if there's dysfunction to the mitochondria, that's going to have effects on whatever organ system those mitochondria are in, which are all over the place. We're talking about the liver right here. And so it affects the normal function of the liver, because we know we learn in biology from like day one in biology that structure determines function. And so if the structure of the mitochondria are damaged, that's going to cause malfunction of the mitochondria's normal process. And so by having this mitochondrial damage, it affects the mitochondria's ability to use fat as fuel. So it blocks this very, very important pathway that the liver is very involved in, is burning fat for fuel. This is a normal process that it's supposed to have, and it's blunted by having this excessive amount of fructose. So it was an interesting study how they discovered that excess amount of fructose damages the mitochondria, and that has a downstream effect on the genes that allow fat burning to happen. And so not only will that have an effect directly on the liver itself, but that's going to have like a body-wide effect, because if the liver has this problem, that's going to kind of spill over to other organ systems. We've talked about in the past about, after fatty liver accumulation, then we can get fatty pancreas. And we know the pancreas, that's where insulin is produced. So it can start to affect, just the normal structure and function of the pancreas. And then other organs, systems start getting involved. And then we're off to chronic disease. And so, so this was an interesting study. It really helped kind of give us some detail about how fructose is such a problem. And just think about, people are getting this all the time. Just go to a fast food place. You're going to get a Coke or some kind of beverage. High fructose corn syrup is how it is sweetened. And then you're having, some kind of fast food that's probably going to have some very, very refined ultra processed grain product, and it's going to have probably some meat source with a really, really unhealthy source of fat. So if you have unhealthy fat, that coupled with the ultra processed grain is just going to cause fat accumulation, and then the high fructose corn syrup is going to inhibit the liver's ability to burn that fat that you've just ingested, and that is created and produced by the processed grain. And then the liver just gets fattier and fattier the more and more that these meals are consumed, unfortunately. And this is kind of, the base of the standard American diet, unfortunately. So therein lies the problem. So we have a little bit more clue as to how to battle this very important condition of metabolic syndrome. I'm going to keep reading the studies and bring you the information. All these little details matter. And so I hope you start taking action on some of this information and putting it to work. I'll keep reading the studies and bringing the information. Until then, keep it real.